Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ronald Reagan, who I served, taught me a trick. He said, I don't care how big the audience is, go, shh. It's magic. It really is magic. Thank you very much. And I want to tell you, the last time I was on the stage, it was during the presidential debates, and I can't tell you how good you look to me tonight. When I came in tonight, and I looked at this statement behind me, it brought back a great deal of memories. 33 years ago, Charles Manat of California was the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. I was the chairman of the Republican National Committee. President Reagan was in office. Lane Kirkland was the chairman of the AFL-CIO, and representing the Chamber of Commerce was a gentleman who is no longer with us, Jay Van Andel, of Amway fame, but you're hearing a little bit about Amway now with its selection of the Secretary of Education. And the four of us, across parties and political lines, with the great leadership of Congressman Dante Fascell, a Democratic member of Congress from Florida, we created the National Endowment for Democracy. And it's hard to believe 33 years ago. Carl, where the hell are you out here? Carl Gershman, how have you lasted that long, Carl? It's beyond me. But it was a time when across party lines, things could be accomplished. It could be accomplished. On January 20th, there's a new administration, and there's a new Congress. And I'm extremely hopeful that what they see on this sign behind me is something that they will pay attention to. We must get to a position in this country where Congress and the administration works across party lines for what is in the best interest of the American people. Hopefully that will happen. And I wish Chuck was here. Chuck Manat became one of my closest friends in the world, and we lost him a few years ago, and I miss him to this day. He was there at the very beginnings. We're fortunate tonight, however, we have his daughter here, Michelle Manat. Michelle, stand up. This is for your dad. My job now is to introduce our honoree tonight and talk about someone who's been successful in politics. This gentleman, at the age of 25, was elected to the parliament in Denmark. A few years later, he led his party to 3 consecutive elections where he served as the prime minister from 2001 to 2009. In 2009, when he retired from office as prime minister, he became the 12th Secretary General of NATO. And what a remarkable job he did, facing the challenges at that time in streamlining, in cutting down things that were overly bloated. And government has a way of doing those things, as most of you recall. And he did a tremendous job. He served from 2009 to 2014. And there's a great description of him and his record in your programs. But it's very interesting. He wrote an op-ed, I was just talking to Fred Hyatt a few minutes ago, in the Washington Post in October, before we knew who was going to be in the White House. And here's what he said. I hope that whoever the next president is, they remember the spirit of Presidents Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan. Quote, when the United States shows the slightest reluctance to use hard power, autocrats and oppressors ruthlessly exploit the ensuing power vacuum. I told Anders tonight that it reminded me of an old saying by Lenin. And Lenin said, you stick in the bayonet. And if you feel mush, you keep sticking it. If you feel steel, you withdraw it and go another way. With regard to the United States, in his new book, which just came out in September, he has a very interesting approach, and I'm sorry to bother you with it, but it's a very important quote, I think, to understand the man that John and Madeline are going to honor in a few minutes. Here's what he said. The United States is an exceptional nation, not in the sense that Americans are necessarily better than other people in the world, but it is an undeniable fact that the United States occupies an exceptional position in the world. But that exception comes with exceptional obligations and responsibilities to defend and promote the principles upon which free societies are built: individual liberty, democracy, and the rule of law. That's what IRI and NDI are all about. And I'd now like to ask Senator McCain and Secretary Madeleine Albright to come up, and all of you to welcome Anders Fogh Rasmussen of Denmark.
I am delighted to be back up here in order to honor my very good friend, the Secretary General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who is truly a remarkable leader and somebody that I have enjoyed working with and getting to know because, as Frank said, he understands what NATO is about, what the world is about, what America's role is, and he is a dedicated person who understands democracy and how countries need to function. And so it is my honor, along with Senator McCain, to give my good friend, the Secretary General, the Leadership in Democracy Award from NDI and IRI. Thank you.
Madeline, John, dear guests, thank you very much indeed for that award. I'm extremely pleased to receive it from the International Republican Institute and the National Democrat Institute, a bipartisan arrangement. I couldn't think of a better encouragement to actually continue working hard to promote liberty, promote democracy, promote the rule of law. I'm extremely pleased. I will consider this an encouragement to continue my work in Europe and in the United States. And Frank, thank you very much for your kind introduction tonight. I'm extremely pleased to see the International Republican Institute and the National Democratic Institute work so closely together in a bipartisan manner to promote freedom and democracy. During the last 70 years, we've got used to a world where protectionism was replaced by free trade, closed societies were replaced by open societies, dictatorship was replaced by democracy. During these 70 years, the world has experienced an unprecedented era of peace, prosperity, and progress. Now, we are living in an era where the fear of the consequences of globalization has led to stronger support for protectionism. Fear over the influx of immigrants and refugees has led to stronger support for closed borders. The fear of chaos and weak leadership in democracies has led to stronger support for tough men and autocracy. Under these circumstances, there is a strong need for good men and women who will stand up for the basic ideas upon which we so successfully have built and developed our free societies. And Secretary Albright and Senator McCain are such people. As American Ambassador to the United Nations and as Secretary of State, you, Madeleine, was a staunch proponent of American engagement in the Balkans to stop the bloodshed. And it wasn't until the United States took leadership that a lasting peace was created. As Secretary General of NATO, I asked you to lead the preparations for a new strategic concept. You and your group of experts did an outstanding job. And in 2010, we adopted a new strategic concept for NATO. Madeleine, you have always been a steadfast fighter for freedom and democracy, and your mood can always be read in the pins you're wearing. In the book, Read My Pins, you said, I had this wonderful antique snake pin. So when we were dealing with Iraq, I wore the snake pin. And you had balloons, butterflies, and flowers to signify optimism. And when diplomatic talks were going slowly, crabs and turtles to indicate frustration. Madeleine, I'm very happy to see that tonight you're wearing the Lincoln pin, which reads, as you mentioned, one country, one people. I think that's appropriate for a bipartisan event like tonight. John, I'm so happy to also be with you tonight. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your re-election as U.S. Senator. As we all know, recently you turned 80, but if we didn't know, we wouldn't believe it. You are still going strong, and you are setting an example for all of us to continue working as long as we can. We have met on several occasions in Europe. You have been a frequent guest at the Munich Security Conference as leader of the US delegation and as a highly valued speaker. We have never doubted your position as one of the strongest American voices in favor of American global leadership and continued engagement in Europe. I know that you were disappointed that NATO did not engage more in Syria. Actually, you also criticized me. I remember a statement in particular where you said that you were tired of hearing the Secretary General of NATO get up every morning stating that NATO would not engage in Syria. Tonight, I can tell you, I agreed with you, John. But I couldn't get the allies to support even prudent planning for an operation. John, you have always remembered America's friends and allies. I still recall how warmly you thanked me for my personal support for the United States and my country's contribution to the international military operations all over the world. John, we owe you great respect, and I would like to use this occasion to express my admiration and my gratitude for your service to the United States and to the world. We all know that Secretary Albright and Senator McCain belong to different political parties, but they are united in their desire to see freedom and democracy flourish in the world. Madeleine and John, you represent the very best in the American democracy, the bipartisan support for American global leadership. And let me put it directly. The world needs a policeman. The only capable, reliable, and desirable candidate for that position is the United States. We need determined American global leadership. The world is on fire. The world is on fire. The Middle East is being torn up by war, terrorism, and humanitarian catastrophes that have forced millions of people to flee. Europe is almost sinking under the refugee burden and internal political division. In North Africa, Libya has collapsed and become a breeding ground for terrorists who are spreading instability throughout the region. In Eastern Europe, a resurgent Russia has brutally attacked and grabbed land by force from Ukraine. China is flexing its muscle against its neighbors around the South China Sea. North Korea is a rogue state that threatens its neighbors and the United States with a nuclear attack. And I think there is a link between the American reluctance to use hard power and this outbreak of fire. If the United States retrenches and retreats, or even if the world thinks that the United States retreats, it leaves behind a vacuum that will be filled by the bad guys. If the United States withdraws to concentrate on nation building at home, the forces fighting against liberal democracy and our way of life will gain ground. The United States will be faced with stronger foes, weaker friends, and a more insecure world. And that would definitely not make America great. Appeasement doesn't lead to peace. It just incites tyrants. And any failure to counter oppression will only invite further oppression. That is the lesson of the 20th century, a lesson we must never forget. And that's why President Truman established a new rules-based world order centered around a series of international institutions and economic programs. He created an American-led world order that set the stage for the Cold War. Truman elevated engagement to moral choice directly affecting every single American citizen because it was based on American values. He said, "I believe that we must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way." In 1961, President Kennedy expressed what is probably the strongest commitment to American global leadership ever given by a president of the United States. He said in his inaugural address, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty." And President Reagan ended the Cold War peacefully due to his firm conviction that capitalism is superior to communism. He said, "America's economic success is freedom's success. It can't be repeated 100 times in 100 nations." He was firmly convinced that peace doesn't come from weakness or retreat. It comes from economic and military superiority, peace through strength. So President Truman showed strong leadership and effective conduct by establishing the world order that for 7 decades secured an unprecedented peace, development, and wealth. President Kennedy came to stand as a beacon for the free world with his energetic and eloquent communication. And President Reagan led the United States and the world to the victory over communism and oppression by his firm conviction of American exceptionalism. Hopefully, future US presidents will combine President Truman's effective conduct, President Kennedy's inspiring communication, and President Reagan's firm conviction. This would prepare the ground for strong American global leadership and a better and a safer world, and make America great. The United States is indispensable in its ability to protect and promote freedom and to prevent conflicts, to resolve conflicts, and to help with post-conflict reconstruction. However, the United States should not be left to carry out that job alone. Smart American leadership should strive for alliance building. There is a need to create an overwhelming, credible, and strong democratic supremacy in order to counterbalance the rising and assertive autocracies. And to create a stronger global democratic community, the American president should use his convening power to assemble the world's true democracies in a strong alliance for democracy. It would be a community of shared values, individual liberty, economic freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. A community that would bolster the identity and potency of democracy in a world where the forces of oppression are trying to regain ground. The Alliance for Democracy could help confront common security challenges, including terrorism. It could work to make the liberal capitalist democracies more prosperous, competitive, and attractive by promoting commerce, economic growth, and job creation. It could help promote democracy directly through advice, support, and assistance. It could be a forum for the coordination of policies in other international organizations, including push for reforms to make the United Nations more effective. And the Alliance for Democracy could also be used for joint action, particularly humanitarian interventions. Many of us are inclined to believe that the community of values with the best story will win, that the West won the Cold War because the better world view triumphed and because progress is inevitable. However, the rise of autocratic powers and Islamic radicalism reminds us that the victory of democratic powers over oppression is not inevitable, and it needs not be lasting. History has taught us that we cannot be complacent. Thomas Jefferson reminded us that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. I will continue dreaming of the predominance of capitalism and liberal democracy. I will not accept the argument that certain people are not well suited for democracy. In a world that grows in freedom and democracy, people will have a chance to raise their families, live in peace, build a better future. The terrorists will lose their recruits, they will lose their sponsors, they will lose safe havens from which to launch new attacks. There will be less room for tyranny and terror. But to ensure the progress of freedom and democracy, we must ensure an invincible global balance in favor of the forces of freedom and democracy. You have just had presidential elections. I don't think the American people has mandated retreat. On the contrary, I believe that the outcome of the elections was a reaction to the receding freedom and democracy and the growing terrorism and autocracy that you have witnessed during recent years. I trust America. I trust American leadership. Of course, also America makes mistakes. But who else should be the leader of the free world? I'm tempted to quote Winston Churchill, who once said, that the Americans will always do the right thing after having tried everything else. So, ladies and gentlemen, the free world must unite. The world's democracies must rise to the challenge. America must exercise determined global leadership. Thank you very much for the Democratic Leadership Award. It will be an encouragement for me. Thank you very much.
IRI and NDI, again, thank you for joining us this evening. We will close with a very short video, which is a compilation of remarks from young people from around the world. It captures the hopes of those with whom we work every day. To them, democracy is not a luxury, but something that has real meaning and value in their daily lives. It is their common language.
Democracy is when people are put at the center of all interests.
The right to live in dignity and freedom.
Leadership is service, and the power is with the people.
Democracy is participation.
To elect and be elected.
An opportunity to protect my rights.
It means that everyone has the power to make a change.
I'm involving myself in democracy because I'm demanding for a better future, and I know I'm responsible for making it.
Democracy is the voice for the people who have never granted the opportunity to speak.
If people have choices, then in one way or another, the choices of many people, they always lead to the right direction.
Democracy means
Coexistence.
listening,
power, participation, accountability.
accountability,
The power and the ability of a society.
respect,
Is fairness and justice.
justice,
Advocacy.
youth engagement,
Equality.
Equality.
rights,
Transparency.
Transparency. Woman inclusion.
Is not discrimination.
Freedom.
dignity,
Choice.
Choice.
Expression.
Cool.
Government of the people.
By the people.
for the people.
It's freedom.
Freedom.
Is freedom.
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 Hope.
Dreams.
Democracy is you.
It's a gift.